Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Freedom Variant Podcast. This is episode number 5. And today, my guest is a friend of mine from southeastern Pennsylvania. His name is Andrew Emsley. He's been on my other podcast before a couple of times, 3 times actually, for fitness related stuff and mindset stuff. And I've always known him to be a very good, sound, logical man. He's a true American. He has the spirit and the heart of like what I consider like the old school American values. He believes in true liberty and true freedom. And he's, he understands history and stuff like that. And he's a bit of a wild man, but at the same time, he's well balanced, which I love about him. Andrew, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh man, what an introduction! You set me up too high.
Well, hey, now it's up to you to stay up there. That's all.
Oh, brother. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, man. It's a joy to be able to have the freedom to talk with some of these things openly. We're blessed to be in a country where we're allowed to be critical and outspoken, and we should be, because that is how we continue to grow and to get better, is through constructive criticism.
Right, and I think what we're going to talk about today is the war for information, as you so eloquently put it last night when we were talking about this on the phone. And just this morning, I saw a video from podcast number 4. I interviewed Rob Fox, who is a firefighter in San Francisco, and he just did a video this morning talking about going to a protest. And you want to talk about information? Well, he says that there's this politician over there. He's a guy who sits on the San Diego Board of Supervisors. His name is Nathan Fletcher. He's a Democrat. And Nathan Fletcher is introducing a resolution declaring medical misinformation as a public health crisis. And, right off the bat, this sounds like they want to do more censorship. If they're not already doing damaging censorship as it is, they want to further this, and they want to go after our First Amendment rights. And this segues right into what we want to talk about today. So Can you describe to the audience what you're thinking and what you're seeing as far as this war for information, and why is it so important?
Oh, absolutely, man. We really are living in interesting times. I mean, not in interesting times. We've been blessed in our country, kind of in our culture, to live a little bit in a bubble, but a beautiful bubble, where we have been able to have freedom and lack of censorship and yada, 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 yada. Now, what's really interesting when it comes to this new movement, when it comes to medical information, is we somehow have come into a place where we have decided that doctors and scientists cannot be wrong. Also, that somehow doctors and scientists all agree on the same things, which couldn't be further from the truth. And this is where, as you bring up this move to declare medical misinformation as a public health crisis, well, that then begs the question, what is considered medical misinformation, and who is it that decides what is misinformation versus good information? And this is when we remember that there was a time in our not so distant past where doctors prescribed cigarettes to expecting mothers, knowing that it decreases the weight of the baby. See, that's the thing. It gets a little interesting, and perhaps if we allow our imaginations to go there and view things through a certain lens, even a little bit nefarious. But doctors prescribed cigarettes to expecting mothers in an attempt to ease the struggle of labor. Now, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that fascinating when now we see a pregnant mother smoking and we all point the finger of judgment and say, oh, what a horrible person. She's basically damning the life of that child. Now, there is also a time in the scope of things, again, the not so distant past, where doctors prescribed things like cocaine after doing a bloodletting procedure, right? To bleed the ghosts out of your veins that were causing the sickness, okay? And dare I say that one of the most evil men of all time, and especially in modern history, was Dr. Mengele. Key word there being doctor, right? The head physician of the Nazi regime. And we also should remember the Japanese doctors and scientists in that unit. I forget what the number was. It was unit something, 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 where they did all these medical experiments that actually made some of the Nazi experiments look like kindergarten. And so as we move into this age of medical information versus medical misinformation, and we have doctors like, for instance, Dr. McCullough, right? A doctor who, listen, I haven't read all this stuff. I don't know everything he thinks. I'm sure I probably disagree with some of the things he says. In fact, if ever any of us find ourselves agreeing completely with what anyone says, then we need to take a good hard look in the mirror and realize it's time for a self-check, because that is very rare, right? So if we're ever agreeing completely with what someone says, maybe we're not doing any critical thinking on our own part. So that said, there's docs like Dr. McCullough who's out there teaching, hey, there's real good science to show that with early treatment, SARS-CoV-2 is treatable and curable. And there's docs out there saying, hey, with a certain regimen of these nutritional supplements, with eating a healthy diet, getting a certain amount of exercise and daily sun, this all sets up the body for metabolic health that kind of boosts the natural immunity against these kind of viruses. SARS viruses are not new. SARS viruses have been around for a long time. Coronaviruses, I should say. Coronaviruses have been around for a long time. But SARS as well, right? This is SARS-CoV-2. COVID-19 is the development of the SARS, protocol. Now, when it comes to coronaviruses are plentiful, all right? And they tend to infect animals. Now, let me also stop and pause and say I am not an expert in biology. I am not an expert in pathology. I'm not an expert in immunology. I am not an expert in a lot of things. So when I talk about this stuff, I talk about this stuff as a concerned citizen who enjoys to read, who is interested in reading the scientific papers and getting as close to the primary sources as possible. And I'm speaking as a corrective, holistic massage therapist and physical trainer, right? Somebody who teaches their students and lives my own lifestyle in a way that promotes good health, daily health, real health insurance, real life insurance, right? I certainly do not have anything against modern medicine. I have benefited very much from modern medicine. I have health conditions of my own that I've lived with. And so I just say this to preface that everything that I say should be taken with a grain of salt, right? And I try to share as little as my own opinion as possible and try to just stick to the information that's coming out there. And I can't say dogmatically, hey, this information is right and this information is wrong. And that kind of brings us right to this idea of information versus misinformation. We have, it's not Looney Tunes and crazy folks out there who are talking about natural immunity, who are talking about ways of beating this virus and protecting ourselves that do not involve an experimental vaccine. And there's a lot, there's a big, there's a big, I guess, thought line, for lack of a better word, that folks that say this vaccine is not experimental. And that's bullshit. mRNA vaccines are not experimental, but the COVID-19 vaccine is. In fact, we are in the experiment. We are part of the experiment. This is the clinical trial.
Yeah.
And so we have doctors presenting information that is contrary to other doctors presenting information. And so it's not, we can't really say, oh, this side's crazy and this, or this side's crazy, this side's right, this side's wrong, because we have, on both sides, we have experts in their fields presenting information that each side believes is accurate, true, and correct. And we're kind of left as citizens who aren't experts in these things to do our best using logic, reason, common sense, gathering as much information as we can that is, I guess we could say, credible, which that's the other thing, right? Credible studies are funded. So oftentimes we're faced with the idea of, okay, well, this seems right, this seems credible, and yet the studies being privately funded by the corporation that is selling the product that the studies need to be done on, that now the studies somehow say, oh, everything's fine. And so where do we get our information? How do we decide what's right and what's wrong? And it's not easy. And we're kind of left almost to decide, okay, who are we putting our faith in? Are we going to put our faith in this doctor or this doctor? Are we going to trust this study or this study? And it's not easy. And so we do the best we can, right? And this is where, you know, I know you and I have talked, like you're mentioned, you and I have talked a little bit before. You know, both of us kind of come from an old school mentality. You know, I grew up being taught that the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese.
I like that. Yeah.
And we should always be a little wary of the cheese, especially when it's government cheese, right? And, you know, for folks who, and before I say this next part, I'm not going to reveal my vaccination status because ultimately, you know, through the lens that I view things as, I view things through the lens as an American and what's valuable to us as Americans. And at the heart of America is the idea of individual freedom and the individual's right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Ben Franklin, in his famous quote, right? Those who choose safety over freedom deserve neither. Now, that's a little easier said than done, right? Like, for instance, you're being faced with a vaccine mandate where you're being told, okay, well, you either have to get the shot or you're going to lose your job. And so now you're kind of faced with a decision. All right, well, do I stand up for my freedom and not get the shot? Or do I keep my family safe and provided for and get the shot? And that's not an easy choice, right? It's a lot easier to say, hey, those who choose safety over freedom deserve neither, when you don't have a family that's relying on you to put food in their mouths. And so that's why, you know, you're not going to find me standing up some dogmatic protester, like, rah, telling people what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Because how do you say that? So that's why I don't completely agree with Ben Franklin on that. But I will say this, I think what his statement really highlights is the idea that freedom and safety are not just different things. They are not the same, but they are diametrically opposed to each other. And that safety is the opposite in a lot of ways of freedom, because what comes with safety is containment. And freedom is not safe.
Yeah.
Because in order to have the freedom to be free, we must also grant everybody that equal freedom. And we know well, we've talked about it many times, the reality of evil and evil people in this world that do evil things. You know, we get a little caught up sometimes because most of us know really good people. You and I surround ourselves with good men. You and I surround ourselves with good women. We hang out with good people. So then we get that whole confirmation bias thing of assuming that the world is this nice, wonderful place, right? And we forget the story of the three little pigs, right? And the pig that built his house out of brick is the one who withstood when the big bad wolf came to his door. Right? And the big bad wolf does come to our door sometime. Right? And so this is where freedom and safety, they're not the same thing. And so now we're faced, each one of us, based on our circumstances, with a decision on how to move forward. Some of us do have pre-existing medical conditions where, should they get the vaccine, there is a big risk that it will kick up what they're already dealing with in a way that cannot be reversed. I have a client with psoriatic arthritis. Her doctor wants her to wait a minimum. This is from the doctor. Her doctor wants her to wait a minimum of 3 years before she gets the vaccine because of what she's already dealing with, right? So there's a lot of like really rash judgment against vaxxers versus anti-vaxxers, and both parties are pointing at each other, calling the other team stupid and dehumanizing. That's exactly, we've talked before, right? That's exactly what the powers that be want. They don't want us to come together. They want to keep us divided. And of course, it's that that amorphous powers that be, whoever they are. But I won't reveal my vaccination status. And I don't want anybody to reveal their vaccination status to me, because ultimately, I think some people who want to get that vaccine should go get in line and get the vaccine. And I think other folks who don't want to get the vaccine, that's their choice. Mm-hmm. What I see as a genuine threat right now is the erosion of privacy, particularly the erosion of medical privacy. And this is something, access to our private medical records is something that the federal government has been trying to get for a long, long time. They've been trying to gain access to this stuff for a long time. This is not new. Anybody who pays attention, and this is the true beauty of the internet, this is the true beauty of having these little black boxes that we hold in our hands, right? These little black mirrors that we can literally sit on the shitter. I've said this almost this exact same thing on Silly's Nation. You know, there's a real beauty in watching a Senate hearing live taking a shit. Like, that is America, man. Yeah. You know, that is America. And that's how it should be. As citizens, we do have access to this information. We really do. Just most of us have been deluded and kind of brainwashed to not thinking for ourselves. And we've forgotten that thinking is a skill. And we get used to thinking based off of what pundits, whether that be a podcast host or a political pundit like Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow, any of them, what they think about things. Yeah. And the news has changed from giving us unbiased information. And by the way, not that that's anything new either. We always need to remember that Operation Mockingbird was decades ago, all right? Decades ago. And it came to an end decades ago, even though it never did. So the propaganda is still a thing. Nothing's new under the sun. We're just waking up to it because now, thanks to these little black boxes, thanks to the conversations we can have internationally across states with folks through our other black boxes, we can talk about these things and put the puzzle pieces together for ourselves and actually see the information from a primary source and realize, because we are smarter than the average bear. See, that's where they've gone wrong. They've gone wrong by assuming that we are all the vulgar, right? And that's a whole another thing we'll get into another time. The difference.
What's the word?
The vulgar.
A vulgar. Yeah.
Yes, we are. And so I'm not going to get too deep into this next line. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to leave it at that. And at another point in time, we can get into it. But this is what I'll say. There are folks in life all across the globe who are considered initiated men and women. All right? And nothing I'm saying right now is opinion. Nothing I'm saying is conspiracy theory. Everything I'm saying is factually verifiably true. There are folks all across the globe who are initiated folks that consider themselves to be part of a group that is fundamentally different from another group of people. And that other group of people is called the vulgar.
The vulgar would be the masses,
That's correct.
uneducated, slothy,
That's right.
lazy. They just take up resources. They don't really contribute anything back to society. They're just
Yes.
kind of like hanging on the tit a little bit, and they're almost meaningless.
Bingo, bingo. And this is nothing new. This has been the pyramid system of power that's been in place for a long, long, long time.
Yeah, and if I could just interject,
Please.
you know, you mentioned the pyramid, and think about when you hear concentration of power or centralized banking or centralized government. That's everything going to the top of the pyramid. So you're
Yes.
concentrating power to the top of the pyramid. So in the United States, our founding fathers created a system of checks and balances to keep power from concentrating. So you have all these different branches, and they go at war with each other.
Yes.
It's called representative government, and it usually takes 100 years just to make a fundamental change. And I'm saying that because if you read history books, you'll see, well, it takes like it pretty much people have to grow up, live, and die and get out of the way of the new people who have the new ideas. And it takes like almost 100 years. So it's a slow, clumsy process that we are in, but it comes with the territory. It keeps us from concentrating power, and since it's a slow moving thing, people actually have will invest. They will invest in the society. They will invest in our banking because there's no abrupt changes. So why I'm pointing this out is because it all requires debate. It requires information and people exchanging information, and it takes a long time to go through it all and get to where you got to go. It might take days, weeks, years, decades. And we're not doing that with this vaccine. And we're not doing that with mandates. We're not stopping and saying, hey, let's have a public debate and let's discuss what this problem that we're creating now, what kind of problem that could create in the future, or what this solution, what we think is a solution, could actually become as a problem in the future. What are we doing? Why aren't we having this information exchange? And that's right back to what we were just discussing there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, man. So you mentioned a couple really important points there. So I'll say this to start, just to wrap up the whole vaccination status thing. Ultimately, the reason why these conversations are really important now is because the federal government, since, and this is going to tie right into our founding fathers and what you just mentioned. The war for the control of the population between the federal government and the states is nothing new. In fact, it has existed since the inception of the 13 colonies. And we, rightfully so, we mythologize our founding fathers. Every culture has its heroes. In India, they have the Hindu gods. And what's really cool about the Hindu gods is, and remember, this is not metaphysical to them. This is not just airy-fairy stories. This was real historical stuff. And they see the Hindu gods as these like superhero figures, and these almost normal men and women, but like super men and women who took part in these great historical battles that set up the way things are the way they are now. And you know, in our Western religion, you know, if I'm going to speak from a Judeo-Christian standpoint, you know, we have our heroes like Solomon and Samson, and David, and then of course into the Christian era, Jesus and Paul. Right now, if we're going to talk about like German mythology, the heroes, you know, we've got Odin and Thor and yada yada yada. Now, or I should say Scandinavian. Right now, here in America, right, we have our own. That's the thing. America's a country, but we're also kind of a religion in a way, because America is a country that physically embodies ideals, or at least it's in its philosophical nature. That's the idea, that's the concept. And so our founding fathers, Washington, Franklin, James Madison, Paul Revere, right? Thomas Jefferson, they gain almost godlike status. We have these stories about them. They become these mythological figures. And what's neat is to think of them that way, but then to also remember that they were men like you and I. They were men with ideas. They didn't all agree. In fact, one of the things I always found interesting is where I believe it was, and listen, I could be wrong on this. I'm going from memory, and listen, I've been hit in the head a lot, Fred. I've got brain damage and I smoke a lot of weed. So everything I say should just be taken with a grain of salt. Never too seriously. Whoops, I am just a monkey. I believe it was James Madison, but I could be wrong. In fact, it was whoever Paul Giamatti played in the HBO special. That wasn't James Madison. Who did he play? Do you remember that? Did you see that?
Yes, and I thought it was Madison myself.
Is it Madison? Well, maybe it was. Again. Well, he and Thomas Jefferson did not agree when it came to voting rights. Right. Thomas Jefferson said, hey, we should put the power in the hands of the people. And James Madison was like, dude, have you met
the people?
And so, you know, that's the thing. We were talking about the idea of the initiated versus the vulgar before. And again, to be balanced and to kind of, you know, be honest about it. It's not necessarily kosher to say stuff like this anymore, but man, there are a lot of ignoramuses out there. There are a lot of genuine dumbasses walking the planet. I grew up watching That 70s Show, and Red was always calling everybody a dumbass, and I really resonated with Red. You know, I really saw where he was coming from, and I, especially now, you know, IQ is still a thing. We've really gotten away from that. The IQ is a thing, and that thinking is a skill. There are college courses that are structured to teach people how to think. Logic 101 is a thing, right? And so they're not totally wrong, those initiated folks, when they're like, oh, the people are kind of dumb. But that's also where they've gone wrong, because we're not so dumb anymore. Thanks to the internet, thanks to technology, we can connect with other people. We can hear about their anecdotal experiences. We can access scientific papers. We can read them for ourselves. Yes. We can then go to the sources, and we can see the sources and the studies that were cited. And we can then look into that and read that.
Right.
You know, the thing is, and I know we want to talk a little bit about the virus too, so I don't want to transition too early in that. But the thing is about this whole idea of, did the virus come from or not come from a lab? It was very, very easy from the very beginning, Fred, to figure out exactly where the virus came from. And anybody who was at least had the eyes to follow the money trail, to do a little bit of research. And I'm not talking about YouTube videos. I'm talking about actually looking into it, actually looking into the history of the virus, the lab in North Carolina, what happened there, the researchers that were being funded by India, China, and the United States government into gain of function research, right? How that research then moved directly from the lab in North Carolina to the virology lab in Wuhan, which is the coronavirus lab in Wuhan, which is, by the way, run by the Chinese scientist who was the Chinese scientist at the lab in North Carolina. All anybody had to do, Fred, was follow the paper trail, follow the money. It was public information. Right. There's no need to have conspiracy theories about it. There's no need to have crazy debates about it. All we had to do was actually take, Fred, I found some of that stuff out in like 10 minutes, man.
Yeah.
All you got to do is know how to do a proper Google search. And guess what? Anybody who's been to college, they actually take us into the library. And if you pay enough attention, they teach you how to do that shit. Heck, they teach you how to do that shit in middle school these days when you have to write your very first research paper. That's it. It's not hard. It's not complicated. I'm no fancy pants, super smart kind of guy. No, I just remember the shit they taught me in 7th grade, man.
Let me ask you this question. This is just dawning on me here. So, well, not really dawning on me now, but it's been culminating. So what we're saying here, what you're saying is that the information is out there to be had.
It's out there.
All out there. But there is a narrative being run over the information that the powers that be want you and me and everybody else to believe and to follow.
Yes.
Now, there are a lot of people out there that are dumbasses, but there are a lot of people out there that could read something and pretty much say, okay, brain, click, 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 a couple, a little bit of smoke comes out your ears. Maybe you got to talk to your smart friend or a relative and just verify what you're reading. Maybe there's a couple big words you got to look up. But other than that, you look at it and you say, damn, whatever the narrative says, what I'm reading is it looks like the smoking gun. This is it. Now, people either believe what they read and they believe their own judgment, or they put that shit down and they go, oh, I don't know, man, that's creepy. And then they run right back to the narrative and say, okay, I'm going to believe in you instead. Is it a fear response, or is it a conditioned response to run back to, daddy and mommy and make it all better? Because I look at society sometimes as not a bunch of people. I look at it as one organism acting, like a massive glob of people, but it's almost like there's groups acting in a psychological profile.
Yes. And
there's this group that says, nah, I'm not having this logic. I'm going back to, the nice story, the Christmas story.
That's right, man.
What is that?
Yes, the Christmas story, brother. Oh, man. That's the thing. And I always like to give credit where it's due. And I just really, I got to tell you, man, I love the way your mind works. Seriously. You say things a lot of times and I'm just like, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So everything you just said, man, is I would agree with and say, man, that's what I see too. And there is good reason. And humans have been doing this for a long time. You said all the right words. You said mommy, you said daddy, you said Christmas story. What you're describing really isn't all that much different than the path that a lot of us take in our spiritual lives. We all have the ability to connect from our heart space with this mystery that we are in. And we all have the ability and the capability to explore that, to pursue, who I'll use the word God because I'm a Western guy that speaks English. And so to me, that's the word that I use to describe what I'm talking about. But that said, and we've talked before, if I was in India right now and I was Hindi, I would say, I would say Brahma, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, exploring the mystery, the creator, and this is right. So here is my opinion, right? My opinion of as I'm speaking now, I'm definitely speaking from my worldview, but a worldview that I have come to see through logic and reason. And so that said, we have like the circumscribed stories. We have the Bible, right? We have the Hindu mythology. We have the Buddhist sutras, right? We can go to the books. We can go to the stories. We can read the things, and we can say, "Oh yeah, that sounds nice. I'm going to put that. I want to wear those clothes. I'm going to put that hat on because they already have it picked out for me." Right. And that's easy. And I can just put it on and it's comfortable and I can feel good about it. And look, oh my gosh, they're all wearing the same outfit too. So now I match with everybody else. And that's what I've always wanted in life, is to be something part of something bigger than myself. Right. Because that is what everybody, I mean, heck, man, even in our community, in the steel mace community, right? On one hand, each one of us is approaching this from a unique place and angle, and we're pursuing it through health in our own life. But there's also then this, you can clearly see, the folks, and not everybody falls into this, but a lot of folks really desire to be part. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with this, but really desire to be part of something bigger, some movement. And so we attach our identities, and you'll see how this will then come full circle to the question you just asked. We attach our identity to these external movements. And in fact, when Jamie and I came to visit you last, we briefly started talking about ideas and this idea of what's called an egregore. And an egregore is a big idea that a lot of people feed into, a lot of people subscribe to. And therefore, in time, if enough people subscribe to this idea, the idea becomes real. It becomes a reality. And this idea, though, the reality of this idea is existent only because the group of folks that feed it. And this is where it gets, a little, I guess, metaphysical, right? And philosophical, because it's the idea that we're feeding energy into this idea. And as a community, if we do that, it makes this idea something that is actually real and existent in this realm of experience that you and I are a part of. And what I just said is very, I guess, kind of, you got to think about it a little bit, but it's actually very practical. The easiest way of seeing this is the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, any company you've ever worked for, right? Any band you've ever listened to, right? These are all egregores. In fact, every single inception of a government itself is an egregore. And this is where then we get to identity, groupthink, and the nature of what I will say beta versus alpha versus sigma. All right. And this goes for all human beings. Okay. We fall into one of these three categories. And listen, we can interchange. This is very dependent oftentimes upon our environment and the situation. Beta, when we are as a human in beta mode, we are looking for a leader, whether that be an individual, a philosophy, a religion. We're looking for something to give us meaning to follow, something else. When we are in an alpha mode, we're still a part of the group. Betas and alphas are interchangeable. They're all reliant upon each other. You can't have an alpha without betas, and you can't have a beta without an alpha. You can't have a leader without followers, and you can't have followers without a leader. It's as simple as that. So when I say alpha and beta, I'm not talking about a hierarchy of importance. I'm actually not talking about a hierarchy of self-value. That's where it gets misconceived. I'm simply talking about the fundamentals of group dynamic, how we express ourselves as a part of individuals in a species, right? And so the alpha is the one that oftentimes is either stepped into the role of the leader or the group has chosen to be the leader, because the alpha kind of represents the group idea. And then you have the sigma, right? And when we're in sigma mode, that's when we don't actually give a shit about what the alpha or the betas are doing, because we stopped really caring what the group is doing in general, and we're doing our own thing. Now, the interesting thing is, even though we might not care so much about what the group is doing, the group oftentimes cares a lot about what we're doing, or what the sigma is doing. And when the sigma then develops a heart for the group, the sigma then does their own work, pursues the information. It kind of takes up the mantle of responsibility for their own life. But then, because they've been able to take the time for that inward focus, then can turn their eyes outward. And that's when they really feel love and compassion and a sense of responsibility for their family, their loved ones, their community, their state, their country, right? This is maturity. This is maturity, what we're talking about. I know we're touching on a lot of different things, but it's because it's all interdependent, all interrelated. And we can't talk about just one of these things without bringing up all of it in the soup, because it's nuanced. It's not so black and white, right?
Yeah.
It is very nuanced. And so we have this dynamic, right? And in the group, and we're all seeking meaning. And then we all find ourselves at some point in time subscribing to these greater ideas than ourselves, these egregores, to define our own identity. And this is why then people cling to their beliefs so strongly, so firmly, even after being confronted with hard evidence that what they've believed for a long time is factually false.
Yeah.
And when I was in middle school, I think it was like the 6th or the 7th grade, I read a book called Where the Red Fern Grows. And there was this beautiful, actually it's a really sad scene, but it's something I've remembered my entire life, because the message was, it was so perfectly written that even as like a young 13, 14-year-old boy, however old I was, I understood that what I was reading in this example was important. And it was, the kid was learning how to catch a raccoon. And so what he did was he made a raccoon trap. He took a glass jar, and he put a silver dollar in the glass jar. And I don't know if this is actually factually true, if this is actually an old way of catching raccoons or not. But the idea in the book was that raccoons are attracted to shiny things. And once they grab onto it, they will refuse to let go of it. And so the hole in the jar was just big enough for the raccoon to put his hand in to grab the silver dollar. But he couldn't get his hand out of the jar as long as he was holding onto the silver dollar. Now, here's the thing. The raccoon could have let go of the silver dollar and taken his hand out of the jar and been free. Instead, the boy shows up the next morning to find his catch, his prey, because the raccoon's still holding on to the silver dollar. And boy, is that not a wonderful example of the way we cling to our beliefs. We cling, and which, by the way, the word belief is an Anglo-Saxon word that literally means to wish. So our beliefs are the things that we wish were true, the way we wish things were. And when we cling to them too hard, and when we find our own self-identity too much in these things, that is the equivalent of building our house on sand, right? To cite scripture. If we're going to cite just the old fable, that's the pig that builds his house out of straw, right? We must build our house out of brick. We must build our foundation out of stone, and we can only do that by doing the hard work ourselves, right? And that means going into the forest, not on the trail that's already been forged, but going into the forest in the dead of night, in the darkest part with your machete, and forging your own way, and learning the reality of life by being in the reality of life, right? And finding our self-identity from the inside out, discovering the nature of who we really comes together in such a way that enable us to function as supercomputers. I mean, supercomputers are modeled after us, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. And so when we are able to find our own self-identity in our own value, and then pick up the responsibility for our own life, the responsibility for thinking our thoughts, the responsibility for feeling our feelings, which also comes along with picking up the responsibility of looking into our history and saying, hey, you know what, for a lot of life, I might have been a dumbass. I might have been a jerk. I might have been wrong a lot. And being able to accept that. And this is where then the idea of cognitive bias comes into play, right? Because we've attached our identity to the things that we think, because other people have told us this is how we should think, then to change that, to accept information that is not just different, but contrary to the information that we've already decided that is true. Oh man, well boy, that pulls the thread on a sweater that really scares us, because that, heck, if that means, if we were wrong about that, oh my goodness, Fred, who knows what else we've been wrong about? And the identity unravels. And that leaves people as adults feeling infantile, scared and afraid, because now there's no mommy and daddy to come to the rescue. And now it feels inside as if the floor has crumbled and we're falling into an ocean that we have never really quite learned how to swim in. And this is the ocean of being a free thinker, the ocean of owning that spirit inside. And this is the spirit, and this is my humble opinion, but the true spirit of being an American, of questioning authority, questioning the status quo, but at the same time standing up for the individual's right to live as they see fit, as long as it's not infringing upon anyone else's rights to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. You know, and not to segue into this, but this is where, you know, I tend to be, I guess, a lot of conservative in my ideas when it comes to the federal government, but very liberal in my ideas when it comes to social things. I would actually, if I were to throw out whatever, you know, for a label, right, I would probably say I probably am closest to what would be called a classical liberal, right? I believe in liberty. Mm-hmm. I do wish, actually, and I say the word belief on purpose, I do wish for the individual's right to liberty. I wish that was the way it were. It's not. It is idealistically, but it's not the way it is in practice at the moment. It never really has been. It's been that way for some, but not all. Right. You know, but as a true American, we want to see that pursuit be available for all. And so that's where it's like, on one hand, get them Democrats out of my pocket, right? And stop telling me what I can and can't do with my own body. Hey, and that goes, by the way, for the Republicans that want to tell me what I can and can't put into my own body. Mm-hmm. That goes for the Democrats that want to tell me what I can and can't put into my own body, right? And by the way, that also then goes for, once someone's over 18, stop telling people what they can and can't do with their own body. And this is where and as I said, not to segue into this because it's a whole nother conversation, but this is where every person who believes in genuine American liberty should also be on, and this is a totally separate subject, but should also be on the team of trans people. Yeah, and I know that's a big transition, but I'm totally serious. Yeah, and I'm not talking about hormone therapy and stuff for children. Right. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's right. But I mean, I truly think that it is our duty to stand up for the individual's right to live life the way they see fit, as long as they are not infringing upon anyone else's rights.
Yes.
And so I bring that up because I do want folks to know that that is, or at least what should be, the true conservative, classically liberal outlook.
Right.
We should be pointing our finger at the federal authority saying, hey, you better keep in check, buddy, because you're here to serve me. I pay your bills. And at the same time, we got to get away from this bullshit about telling people what they can and can't do with their own body, whether we're talking about the way they want to physically modify their body to express themselves and feel comfortable in their own skin, or what they want to put into it, what they want to smoke, what they want to drink. You know what, Fred, that's the thing, what kind of vaccines they want to put in their body. I don't give a shit, brother.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit if people want to get vaccinated or not. You know why? Because I'm taking care of myself and my loved ones. And because I'm taking care of myself and my loved ones, I know I'm doing the right thing. And that's putting me in a position where I feel safe. I feel honored because I'm taking on the responsibility for my own life. I don't give a shit what anybody else does. That's their choice. And that's the heart of it, man. That's the heart of it. And
Exactly.
they're trying to divide us on that. They're trying to turn us anti-American. They're trying to get us to point fingers at our neighbors and our loved ones to try and impose our way of thinking onto them, to erode the individual's right to free speech, free thought, and living their own way on their own property. You know? And,
Yes.
And hey, not to be too, I'll also say this, because I think I brought this up and it's kind of surprised some people. That said, if I'm going to tell the federal government, hey, it is not your right to tell me what I can and can't do with my own body. It's not your right to tell me how to live unless I'm infringing on someone else's rights. Here's the thing when it comes to private business. It is also the owner of that private business's right to choose who they do and do not want working for them.
Yep. Yes.
I said it.
Yes.
I said it.
No, because it's very simple. When you accept true freedom and true liberty, you're accepting the good and the bad that comes with it. And when I say the good and the bad, I'm meaning what your perception of is good and bad. So
yes.
If Joe Blow, who loves his freedom, but doesn't like the fact that his next door neighbor is doing something that they don't agree with, as long as it's not infringing, just a personal opinion, they can't say anything about it, because guess what? The same thing that's giving you your freedom is the same thing that's giving them their freedom. You can't have freedom for me and not for thee. It doesn't work that way. And it is such a basic.
There we go.
We lost you there for a second. I just kept talking.
That's all right. Yeah,
but it is such a basic thing here. It's not complicated, and that's what I've been saying as I started this podcast off. Is that we're not talking about something complicated here. We're not talking about politics and stuff. This all comes down to this tiny little detail right here, right in front of us. It doesn't have to get more complicated. Personal freedom, liberty, what? Yes. And you already said it, as long as it's not infringing on others. And I just want to say about the vaccine, because I know people were saying, well, if a person's not vaccinated, they're infringing on me because they're going to get me sick. And all I want to say to that is
bad logic.
Well, let's keep it simple, Andrew. This particular vaccine, the powers that be, the narrative, everybody that's pushing the vaccine have already said the vaccine does not prevent you from spreading it or getting it or anything. So guess what? It's a moot point. It's a moot point. We're looking at a vaccine that if the vaccine 100%, they had it, they figured it out. Here's the math, right? And they're showing you this vaccine will not, if you're vaccinated, you won't give people COVID. Then that's a different story. But that's not the story. The story is it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not, you can still spread it. That's the big joke right now with this. That's why it's a clown show. We're literally looking at people talking themselves in circles saying, well, you got to get vaccinated. Well, why? Because you're going to get somebody sick. Yeah, but you're vaccinated. What do you care? Well, because you could give it to somebody that's not vaccinated. But they chose not to be vaccinated. So it's, why are you worried about them? If you're so worried, just get the vaccine. But by the way, just know you're going to have to still wear a mask, because even though you're vaccinated, you can still give it to somebody.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
This is the most absurd thing I've ever seen, and people are clinging to it. So that's why this whole discussion about logic and why people run back to their beliefs was good. It was good. And Andrew, I think what we should do really is I think we should end it here.
Yeah,
I know we wanted to transition into something else, but you're definitely going to be coming on the podcast more often.
Oh yeah, we'll save that for next time, man. We'll save that for next time.
Because let's tell everybody what we're going to talk about next. The next topic we're going to bring up, the
imagination station.
Exactly. You came up with that. The imagination station. So
thought experiments.
Yes, we're just going to go into. We're gonna have to warn you right now. You got to put your seatbelt on. You're gonna have to put your helmet on, because we're going to go into the land of imagination. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what ifs. All right, and that's because humans were given something called an imagination. Only creature on the planet that has imagination. Although I sometimes feel like dolphins and whales might have some kind of imagination.
My cat dreams, man. My cat dreams.
You got a very special cat.
We literally watch my cat. He's in his sleep. He's like running.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of imagination. But what I'm talking about is humans can actually predict the future of something by looking at all the variables in front of them in the present, and then making judgments and determinations on, well, if A plus B equals C, therefore so on and so forth, and where does that lead to? And you could extrapolate into the future various points where this present situation can take you. And that's all logic, it's all reasoning. And I think it's something fun to talk about, but I think it's important to talk about, because that is going to sort of explain what I guess we call conspiracy theories, whatever people want to call it. Like, we're going to push the envelope. We're going to go there. We're going to push it. So you guys got to tune in next time for it. Andrew, thank you for.
It's always a joy, man.
Yeah,
always a joy to be here with you.
You're a great speaker. You have very sound logic and reasoning. I hope everybody was able to get something good out of this, because we veered off. It's only episode number 5. But the previous episodes, we didn't get like metaphysical and philosophy as we did today. And I think this was a good change, and it's something to look forward to in the future.
Right on, man. Right on.
So everybody, you can follow Andrew at Instagram. You're gonna like his name. It's at Sleepy Monkey Man. And he does mace training like me and everything like that. And help me out here. The last episode you did on Steel Mace Nation, I believe, was 113. If it's, I think it's episode 113 or one.
Yeah, that sounds about right. What
people could do is go to your.
They go to my Instagram. I've got a link.
Yes, that's right.
It'll go right to it. Yeah,
so go to at Sleepy Monkey Man, and then follow him, and then click the link, and it'll go to the Steel Mace Nation podcast we did. And why I'm telling people to go there was because it's more of this. Right. It's more of this. There's another guy there. You mentioned him earlier. His name is Jamie Pinto. And we had this really deep philosophical kind of conversation. And and there's some connection to what we talked about here. So if you liked what you had here, there's more of that over there. Until the next time Andrew comes on this podcast.
And what was it? Episode 84. Episode 84 was our episode during quarantine.
Yes.
Where that's when we first talked about all of this.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. So if you want to deep dive on our conversations, God bless you for doing that. But I think look,
or a glass of Chardonnay.
yes, right. Big bag of popcorn. I really think we're not speaking on ludicrous levels here, and we're of sound-minded body, and
Well, I don't know about the sound mind part.
that's questionable. But hey, so is the rest of the world, right? I
Amen.
don't see too much sound mind out there anymore. So I guess we're part of the pack.
Hey man, you can't go crazy if you've already gone crazy.
That's
So
right.
it's a
a
beautiful
done
thing.
deal. It's a beautiful thing.
All right, brother. It's great to be here with you, man.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I'll be in contact with you soon, my friend.
Right on, man.
All
Until
right.
next time.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.